Hello, listeners, and welcome to Health Talk Radio Africa. I am your host, Dr. Mary Mugambi. Listeners, as part of our fertility series, we explore how vaping affects female fertility. Our fertility series was a result of holding a workshop for young couples who wanted to know how they could prepare for conception, pregnancy, and parenthood. Together with an obstetrician, we had a wonderful time teaching and also learning with the young people. After the workshop, at social hour, we sat down for a meal, and that's when a majority of the young couples took out their e-cigarettes. To our utter shock and horror, majority of the young couples started to vape and continued vaping heavily for the rest of the evening. They chain smoked their e-cigarettes for hours. The obstetrician and I just looked at each other and our hearts sunk. Clearly, these young couples had not internalized the message that e-cigarettes are just as dangerous as regular tobacco. They thought that e-cigarettes are a safer option to regular tobacco cigarettes and would help them break the nicotine addiction. However, e-cigarettes increase nicotine addiction. Even worse, they destroy the fertility of males and females, and these young couples wanted to be parents. Listeners, in this episode, as part of our fertility series, we explore how smoking e-cigarettes, known as vaping, affects female fertility. We acknowledge that e-cigarettes are marketed and offered to young people around the age of 14 and 15 years old. However, to comply with streaming and broadcasting regulations, we urge you parents to listen to this episode with your teenagers, young men, and women. Listeners, the era of movie stars, prominent community people, social media influencers, models, musicians promoting smoking products is back after many years. We all have seen the glamorous people on television, movies, smoking an e-cigarette, and they look nice. The e-cigarettes are known by several names, such as vapes, electronic nicotine delivery systems, and Juuls. Research is now revealing that the e-cigarettes are just as dangerous as regular tobacco cigarettes. The damage is often not reversible, especially on male and female fertility. E-cigarettes are battery-powered devices. They have a reservoir holding an e-liquid inside. And they also have an atomizer or a coil that generates heat to heat the liquid. The heat makes the liquid change into an aerosol which is inhaled. The liquid in e-cigarettes contain two compounds called propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. These two compounds are food additives and are not toxic to humans when consumed orally. The problem begins when this e-liquid is heated by the atomizer. The heated e-liquid emits 7 compounds that are toxic to the body's nervous, immune, and reproductive systems. The 7 toxic compounds are acetaldehyde, acrolein, benzaldehyde, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. Other compounds added to the e-liquid make the e-cigarette even more toxic to the human body. Nicotine and flavoring agents are added. When heated and released as an aerosol, nicotine and the different flavoring agents affect female fertility in several ways. We will talk about how this happens shortly. The heating process of the e-liquid and the different hardware components of the e-cigarette release a long list of heavy metals that are also inhaled by the smoker. Small particles of metals like lead, nickel, chromium, aluminium, iron, copper, silver, zinc, tin, manganese, together with the ceramic and silica, are all inhaled by the smoker. Listeners, the worst part is that every component in the e-cigarette destroys female fertility. Listeners, the heavy metal particles that are released during the heating of the e-liquid and the hard components of the e-cigarette affect the maturation of the egg in the ovary. The heavy metals, especially cadmium particles, destroy the cells that develop into a mature human egg. These premature cells are known as the oocytes. Once they are destroyed, there is nothing to mature into an ovum or human egg in the ovary. If there was an egg in the fallopian tube and the fertilization takes place, the fertilized egg begins to divide. Normally, the fertilized egg will begin to divide into several cells as it continues to develop. However, the heavy metal cadmium from vaping interferes with the egg as it is dividing, and further development is completely disrupted. Heavy metals also cause ovaries to be inflamed and destroys the ovarian cells. This lowers the fertility of the female. Heavy metals also interfere or reduce production of steroid hormones such as estradiol. Estradiol is an estrogen steroid hormone. It is the major female sex hormone. It regulates the female reproductive cycle, such as the menstrual cycles. It is also responsible for the development of female secondary sexual characteristics, such as breasts, widening of the hips, and a female pattern of fat distribution. It is also important in the development and maintenance of female reproductive tissues, such as breasts, uterus, and vagina during puberty, adulthood, and pregnancy. Estradiol is produced within the follicles of the ovaries, and heavy metals in the e-cigarettes are destroying the ovaries, drastically reducing the fertility of the female. One can already see what damage e-cigarettes will cause to a teenager who has not completed puberty. Listeners, let us look more closely at nicotine. E-cigarettes or vaping devices are made with nicotine, while others are nicotine-free. Both the nicotine and nicotine-free vaping devices are equally detrimental to our female fertility. The devices with nicotine have nicotine salts. When heated, the nicotine is absorbed rapidly into the bloodstream of the smoker, and to quote a young smoker, delivers a smooth throat hit at high doses. Sadly, the nicotine in e-cigarettes reaches concentrations many times higher than that of tobacco cigarettes. 1 hour of vaping is equivalent to smoking a whole pack of tobacco cigarettes. Yes, 1 whole pack of tobacco cigarettes in 1 hour of vaping. That's how dangerous the e-cigarettes are. Listeners, how do high nicotine levels affect female fertility? Well, to start with, the female reproductive organs are controlled or influenced by several hormones, such as follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estradiol, sex hormone-binding globulins, and others. Nicotine in the e-cigarettes interferes with the production of these hormones and even alters them. Nicotine also interferes with the implantation of a fertilized egg in the womb. How does nicotine do this? Well, nicotine is a powerful vasoconstrictor. It makes blood vessels tighten. It severely impairs blood flow to the uterus, causing the lining of the uterus to thin out. To prepare to receive a fertilized egg, normally the uterus lining must be thick with blood. Implantation will not take place if the uterus lining is thin. Uterus lining is known as endometrial thickness. So nicotine completely interferes with the process of implantation, and the fertilized egg is expelled as part of menstruation. The female fertility is drastically reduced, if not completely destroyed. Listeners, what if there is no nicotine in the e-cigarette? The flavoring agents are equally toxic. Listeners, there are more than 8,000 documented commercial flavors and 500 brands of e-cigarettes and counting. The flavors are what attract the young people to smoking e-cigarettes. Examples of other flavors are bubblegum, mint, grapes, cherry crush, menthol, vanilla cannoli, green apple, cinnamon, and many others. When consumed orally, these flavoring agents are harmless. When heated in the e-liquid of a vaping device, these flavoring agents are cancer-causing or carcinogenic and teratogenic. They cause defects in the fetus. When inhaled, they enter the bloodstream in concentrations thousands times higher than when consumed orally in food. Cinnamon and bubblegum are the flavors that have been heavily researched. Listeners, at the time of recording this podcast, May 2024, majority of research on how flavors affect fertility has been done mostly on males. Most research using flavoring agents done on females is during pregnancy, and pregnancy is not the focus of this podcast. However, scientists conclude that flavors are highly addictive as nicotine. The different flavors are what attract the young people to vape or smoke e-cigarettes. Listeners, remember the vapors that are being inhaled by the smokers of e-cigarettes? The vapors are produced when the e-liquid is heated. Yes, those fumes are very toxic. At the beginning of this podcast, we stated that the vapors have 7 toxic compounds. 4 of those compounds are highly carcinogenic or cancer-causing. They are benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, and styrene. These compounds cause irritation, headaches, they damage the liver, kidney, central nervous system. It does not matter if male or female. At the recording of this podcast, May 2024, there is scant information on how vapors produced attack the female reproductive organs. Again, most research studies are on different types of animals. Majority of research goes on to report how all the components of e-cigarettes, that is the flavors, the nicotine-free vapes, even the low voltage vapes affect the female reproductive system. Majority of research studies and systematic reviews on the effects of vaping on the female agree on the following. The ovaries are affected by becoming inflamed. The oocytes, or the immature cells that become an ovum or mature egg, are destroyed. The ovarian reserve, or the number and quality of eggs in an ovary, are drastically reduced, completely reducing the female's fertility. There is also an ovulation, that is, the female does not ovulate or release any mature eggs during a monthly cycle, rendering her infertile. There is hormonal imbalance since the ovaries are affected. As stated earlier, the production of hormones such as estradiol, even estrogen, is reduced, further lowering the female's fertility. Hormonal imbalance can cause bleeding abnormalities such as metrorrhagia or excessive bleeding in between the menstrual period, oligomenorrhea or irregular, inconsistent bleeding during the cycle, and sadly, early menopause can also occur. The uterus or womb is also negatively affected. The uterus lining becomes thin, no longer receptive to a fertilized egg, and implantation cannot take place. Scientists estimate that during a monthly cycle, a vaping woman has less than 50% chance of conceiving, less than 50% chance of getting pregnant if you are a vapor. If there is fertilization, there is disorganization of the implantation site. As a result, women who vape have a very high incidence of spontaneous abortions. They simply lose the fetus. If a vaping woman carries a pregnancy to term, the infant usually has a low birth weight and a decrease in their height or their length. Listeners, don't be surprised. E-cigarettes or vapes will also cause behavior changes. There is triple addiction of nicotine, the flavors, and the vaping process will cause young people to behave differently than they normally would. Vaping addiction has caused many young high school students to lose focus on their studies because they keep leaving the classroom to go to the toilet or discreet places to vape and get a hit. The behavior observed is identical to addiction of narcotics. Yes, narcotics. As a result, school grades plummet. Many teenagers have reported how they devised cunning ways to vape inside the classroom without the class teacher knowing. Parents and caregivers often find out that their teenager or young person is addicted to vaping during a health emergency. Sadly, now rehabilitation institutions have to admit young teenagers who are addicted to vaping, and they'll be together with narcotic users. Hospital emergency rooms also have had to adjust how they ask questions to a teenager or young patient to check if they use e-cigarettes or vape. Listeners, the most life-threatening consequence of vaping is of women who use birth control pills. Young women who show up in emergency rooms with blood clots and even stroke, majority of them are vapors or e-cigarette smokers. Vaping and using birth control pills is a sure way to get dangerous blood clots. Listeners, when my team and I were putting together information for this episode, two questions kept nagging at us. The first question was, how can humans make, market, and sell devices that destroy people in such a fundamental way? The second question is, why no person is talking about the triple addiction that vapors cause simultaneously? Vaping devices are destroying our young teenage girls and young women by destroying their reproductive systems. Their chances at motherhood are being eroded without their knowledge, long before they even think of becoming mothers. The worst is that the damage is not reversible. Only Only a few scientists have sounded the alarm of triple addiction by e-cigarettes. The first addiction is to nicotine. Years of research with tobacco and now e-cigarette show addiction is extremely difficult to break. There is enough evidence just how detrimental nicotine is to the human body organs. And now it's destroying fertility of our young women long before they think of being parents. Second addiction with e-cigarette is on the flavors. As stated earlier, there are thousands of flavors for e-cigarettes. These flavor agents are harmless when eaten orally, but when heated and inhaled, they are completely toxic and cancer-causing. The third addiction, as revealed by teenagers and young people who vape, is being addicted to holding a vape in their hand and the entire vaping process. The act of vaping is so pleasurable. The e-cigarettes are small, easy to hide inside clothing, school uniforms, school bags, handbags, even within the hairbands. Many look like pens and can be smuggled into schools, colleges, movie theaters, and even inside hospital wards. The vapes come in many colors, with some even in the shape of lipsticks and candy bars. Listeners, please let me beg you to share this episode with your family, friends, and people in your community. For parents of teenage girls and young women, please sit down and listen to this podcast with them. The manufacturers of vaping devices have cunning ways to market their e-cigarettes to our young females. What the researchers and manufacturers know but will not say is that once addicted to the e-cigarette, stopping or quitting is next to impossible. Remember, listeners, as part of our fertility series, there is a podcast episode on how e-cigarettes affect male fertility. An episode you do not want to miss. Listeners, that's all I have for you in this episode of Health Talk Radio Africa. If you have a health or nutrition problem, please challenge us to get a solution for you. We will bring in other experts if need be. I always welcome your comments on this program. Just drop me an email at healthtalkradioafrica@gmail.com. Please subscribe and share this episode with friends, family, and as many people as you can. Help us, help other people, and help your loved ones. Until next time, listeners, eat healthy so you can live healthy. Bye. Bye for now. Bye-bye.